Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the English with Samuel podcast, the program designed specifically for intermediate English learners who want to improve their listening comprehension skills in a natural, relaxing, and engaging way. My name is Samuel, and I am your host, and as always, I am delighted to have you here with me today to practice your English skills. The goal of this podcast, if you are new here, is to bridge the gap between beginner materials, which can often be too slow or unnatural, and advanced native content, which can be too fast and difficult to understand. I speak to you in authentic English, but I articulate my words a little bit more clearly and perhaps a slightly slower pace than you might hear in a Hollywood movie or a frantic news report, giving your brain the time it needs to process the vocabulary and grammar structures without feeling overwhelmed. Today, I have a very special topic to share with you, one that is personal to me and involves travel, adventure, and a little bit of culture shock. We are going to talk about a trip I took a few years ago to the beautiful country of Peru in South America. I was reflecting on my past travels recently, and I realized that this specific trip is full of interesting vocabulary and situations that are perfect for a learning session. Before we dive into the details of the Andes Mountains in ancient ruins, I want to remind you that you can find the full transcript for this episode in the description, which allows you to read along while you listen, ensuring you catch every single word I say. Now, let's get into the story. My journey didn't actually start directly in Peru. It began with a flight from Guadalajara, Mexico. At the time, I was living in Mexico, and I realized there were no direct flights from my city to Lima, Peru. So the first leg of my journey required me to fly to Mexico City. I decided that rather than just sitting in the airport for a few hours, what we call a layover, I would spend 2 nights in Mexico City to enjoy the capital before the main adventure began. I rented an Airbnb, explored the city on my own, and had a wonderful time, but the real reason I was going to Peru is quite a funny story. I didn't actually pay for my own plane tickets. A very good friend of mine was desperate to visit Peru, specifically to see the famous ruins, but he had a major problem. He did not speak a single word of Spanish. He was nervous about navigating a foreign country where he couldn't communicate, so he made me a deal. He said, "Samuel, if you come with me and act as my translator and guide, I will pay for your flights." Naturally, I accepted this generous offer immediately because who would say no to a free trip? So after my short stay in Mexico City, my friend and I met up at the airport and flew together down to Lima, the capital of Peru. We didn't stay in Lima, however. We simply used the airport there to transfer to our final destination, the historic city of Cusco. When we finally landed in Cusco, it was very early in the morning, perhaps around 6 a.m., and this led to our first interesting decision of the trip. Usually, when travelers arrive in a new city after a long flight, they take a taxi or a shuttle bus directly to their hotel. But we looked at the map and thought, hey, we have plenty of time and our hostel won't let us check in until the afternoon, so why don't we walk? We ignored the taxi drivers offering us rides and began walking from the airport toward the city center. It took us about 45 minutes, and while it was tiring, it was a fascinating way to see the city wake up. Cusco is a breathtakingly beautiful place. It has a colonial charm with historic architecture, cobblestone streets, and a very unique atmosphere that feels both ancient and welcoming. Once we arrived at the city center, since we still couldn't enter our room at the hostel, we decided to spend the morning just relaxing in the main square, which is often called the Plaza de Armas in Spanish-speaking countries. We sat on a bench and engaged in one of my favorite travel activities, people watching. If you aren't familiar with the phrase people watching, It simply means sitting in a public place and observing the strangers passing by, looking at their clothes, their interactions, and their behaviors without actually speaking to them. It's a great way to absorb the culture. While we were sitting there, we noticed something quite amusing regarding the physical difference between us and the locals. The people in this region of Peru tend to be quite short in stature. I am fairly tall, standing at around 186 centimeters, but my friend is exceptionally tall, measuring over 2 meters or roughly 203 centimeters. To the locals, he looked like a giant. This difference in height was so shocking to the people of Cusco that on 2 separate occasions, local families actually stopped us on the street. We thought they were going to ask for directions or sell us something, but no, they asked, "Can you please take a photograph with you?" They wanted a souvenir photo with my giant friend because his height was so unbelievable to them. It was a very funny and friendly interaction, and we happily posed for the pictures with them. The city itself was busy, but not overcrowded. We visited in October, which is technically the start of the rainy season, so while there were certainly tourists, because Cusco is the gateway to Machu Picchu and is always popular, it wasn't as packed as I imagine it would be during the peak dry season. It felt like a nice balance of activity and calmness, allowing us to enjoy the charming streets and the cute vibe of the city without being shoulder to shoulder with thousands of other visitors. The highlight of the trip, and the main reason anyone travels to this part of the world, was of course Machu Picchu. This is the ancient Incan citadel, set high in the Andes Mountains, and let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. Sometimes you visit a famous place and it is disappointing, but Machu Picchu is truly magical. To get there, the logistics are quite an adventure themselves. You have to take a train that winds through the mountains offering spectacular views of nature, and then you transfer to a bus that climbs up a very steep, winding road to the entrance. Once you get off the bus, you are immediately hit by the reality of the altitude. The elevation is incredibly high, and the air is thin, meaning there is less oxygen to breathe. We noticed this immediately. We became short of breath, a phrase we use when you feel like you have to breathe faster and harder just to get enough air into your lungs. If you aren't careful at high altitudes, you can actually pass out or faint, which means losing consciousness and falling down. Because of this, walking up the stairs to the viewpoint was a physical struggle. We had to stop constantly to rest and catch our breath. However, once we reached the top and looked down at the ruins, all the pain went away. It was surreal. I had seen photos of Machu Picchu in textbooks and on the internet my entire life, but seeing it with my own eyes was a spiritual experience. The site is incredibly isolated. It is surrounded by jagged green peaks and clouds with no modern civilization in sight, which helps you understand why it remained hidden from the outside world for so long. We didn't pay for a professional guide, but there were so many tour groups around us that we could simply listen in on what other guides were saying to their groups, allowing us to learn about the history for free. Aside from the sightseeing, we also had some interesting experiences with food and local customs. My friend is a picky eater, meaning he doesn't like to try strange or new foods, but I am the opposite. I wanted to try the local delicacy guinea pig. Now, in the US and Europe, guinea pigs are cute pets that children keep in cages, but in the Andes, they are a traditional food source. I ordered a whole roasted guinea pig at a restaurant. To be honest with you, I cannot say it was delicious. The meat did not taste like chicken. It had a very distinct, somewhat gamey flavor that I didn't particularly enjoy. But I'm glad I tried it for the experience. Finally, I have to mention the coca leaves. Everywhere you go in Cusco, you see baskets of dry green leaves. These are coca leaves, the same plant used to make cocaine, but in their natural form, they are mild and completely legal in Peru. The locals use them to combat altitude sickness. We drank coca tea multiple times a day, every single day, to help our bodies adjust to the height.
It's funny to think about now because coca leaves are illegal in many other countries, but there it was just a normal part of daily life, like drinking coffee. It was a trip I will never forget, and I hope this story has helped you practice your English listening skills today. Remember to check the show notes for more resources, and I will see you in the next episode.